Hey everyone, this is going to be a beginner tutorial to teach you how to create this scene. I do want to mention before you guys get started that this tutorial is just on how I created the actual level itself. At the end of the tutorial, if you want to learn how to actually shoot it and export it, I do have other tutorials about that, so feel free to check them out. And without further ado, let's get this started. Okay, let's get started. When you open up Unreal, you're going to go over to Games and then just open a blank folder. Then you can use the project location and name the project and click Create. Now, once you click Create, there's one other thing you need to be doing. Go to your project folder and actually open up all the way into Config. Once you're in Config, go to Default Engine and open that up. Now, you're going to want to go down to the renderer settings, and you want to add these two things. First one's going to be r dot nanite allow tessellation =1, and then r dot nanite tessellation =1. We're going to be using displacement in this tutorial, so by doing this, you're already set up. Now what you want to do is go to Epic Games Marketplace and add these content packs. Now the first one's going to be the European Hornbeam. These are all free. Next one is going to be the Nordic Coast Collections. And then the Megascans Forest Path. So add these to your project and then you're ready to open it up. Okay, now that you're inside your project, you want to go up to File and click New Level, and then just go to Basic Level and click Create. Now, if you click Control Space, you're going to open up your content drawer, which is how you access all your files. Inside here, you're going to see some new stuff, one of that being the European Hornbeam, as well as a Megascans folder. This is all the stuff you just brought in through the Epic Marketplace. Now that that's done, you're going to want to go over to Edit or Window, Quixel Bridge, and open up Quixel Bridge. It's going to ask you to sign in and some other stuff. Just go through all that, and then you're going to want to type in these three things to look them up. The first one's going to be Forest Floor, Dry Fallen Leaves, and then Forest Floor again. So download those, click Add to your project, and then they will pop up in your project after a little while of loading. So now you have them in your project. If you actually go open your content drawer, go to Surfaces, you'll see those three in your project. If you click on the main one, then click on your landscape and go down to the bottom right and click the arrow, it'll add to your landscape material. And then you can also just test around to see which ones you want to start with. I'll start with Dry Fallen Leaves just to get an idea. And then right away, you're going to see some grid lines. So what you want to do is open up your content drawer again. Click on the material instance, go to the very top to tiling, knock that down, turn it on. And then if you bring tiling down to 0.2 and 0.2, it's basically making it a lot bigger. So the grid lines aren't as obvious when you're working up close. Also, it makes the size a little more realistic too when I bring in a man. Okay, so now if you chose a blank project, you're not going to have a mannequin. So to bring that in, you're going to want to open your content drawer, go over to Add, and then go all the way up to Add Feature Content Pack, and then just click Third Person and Add to Project. It's going to take a little while to load, but once that's done, you'll have a mannequin in your project. Perfect. So just X all that out. Go into the content drawer again, and then if you just go up to the search bar and type in MANN, she will pop up, and now she's in your scene. This is always good because it helps you reference the size of things. So for right now, you can tell like the leaves are actually very large, or it's just a big tree. I don't think I'm going to be keeping this landscape, so for right now, this should work out for me. Now the first thing we're going to want to do is start blocking out our scene. So click Control Space, go into Content, click the first Megascans folder. And then click Static Mesh on the filters. Sorry, go to, yeah, there we go, delete the search. Go to the original Megascans, the just normal one. Make sure Static Mesh is clicked, and that way it's going to filter for all the static meshes. And then now what I'm going to do is just start placing some rocks to start blocking out our scene. You'll notice that it's taking a while for it to load in. I will be showing you in a moment kind of how to brute force it so it's just done in one go. So if you press the WER keys, you'll see either rotation, up, down, and then size. In this case, I'm just going to be using the rotation and up and down to place it. And then again, you're going to see how it takes a while for it to load in. And then again, I'll rotate it and kind of sink it a little into the map. So now let me teach you how to brute force it. Go to the very bottom, go to the very top, shift click, and then just drag it all into your scene. Basically what's happened here is it's going to force load everything in this little folder. It takes a while, but it just saves a lot of time. That way you can slowly iterate as you go through. So I do suggest you do this just to kind of like cut it forward. Once everything's in your scene, just do Control back, and then they'll all disappear. And now when you bring things in, you won't be waiting for a long time for them to load in. Okay, so now I'm going to keep building out my scene. Just keep grabbing rocks, rearranging them, and trying to just really frame how you want it to look. Also, if you see things like this where it's a little white, just understand that it's preparing textures. Don't worry too much about it. They will pop in. I'm also going to use these little rock packs to kind of blend in the ground to the rock. Since rocks aren't just abruptly there, there's usually little rocks, big rocks, all kind of collected together. So again, really just building out my scene here. Also, don't be afraid to kind of move them in together and sync them into the landscape. The idea is to try and blend multiple different static meshes together to try and get a more realistic look. So one by itself doesn't really mean much, but if you're able to put them together really well, it starts looking really beautiful towards the end. Also, don't be afraid to iterate and delete things if they don't feel like they're working. The whole point of this is to try new things and see what's looking good. It's the best thing about this program is things are able to be built so quickly that it's not as time consuming to constantly iterate. Okay, now I'll just speed through this so you can slowly see how it's made. You can always stop and look at the different textures I'm using by pausing. But overall, I'm just going to be going around and blocking out our scene, deleting and recreating, and kind of moving things around till I get this U shape of rocks from where I want our scene to be basically framed out. You'll see me move some things forward and then kind of sink it under so it's falling off on the rocks. That's really just to make it kind of have a good gradual fall off with the rocks, since they don't just fall off immediately. And then again, just deleting and moving things around to make it look a little clean. Okay, so now do Control Space again to bring up your content browser, and then go over to Eurobeam Hornbeam. And again, make sure static mesh is filtered, and slowly bring in your trees. There's a foliage system within Unreal, but right now I'm going to be placing trees myself so I can kind of art direct the trees, and then I'll be using the foliage system later in this tutorial to kind of show you how I build everything else out. Again, same thing's happening here. It takes a long time to load, drives me nuts, so I'd rather just get it in one go. So I'm just doing shift click from bottom to top and dragging it all in, letting it load in one time, or at least one long time, and then basically controlling undo, and then I get to bring in my trees without a giant slow. This might be taxing on some systems, but on mine it's fine. And now you're just going to see me start placing different trees. This is really just to art direct it. You'll see me delete some and bring some back. Really just playing around to see what I think works best. Okay, now I'm going to bring in a camera to start helping me build out the scene. So if you go up to the top left to the box of the plus and go to Cinematic and do Cine Camera Actor, that will be your camera. Now I'm just going to bring in some folders to kind of clear things up around here. So the first one I'll just name Cinematic, and then I'll bring in one more folder and name this Objects. Now I'll bring all the objects we just placed into the Object folder, and then in the Cinematic folder we'll have our camera. Now go to Cinematic folder, right click the camera, and go down to Pilot Cine Camera Actor, and now you'll literally be in control of the camera. So kind of place it how you like it, and then go to the bottom left of the screen, and the first thing I'm going to change is film back to DSLR, and then I'll change the focal length to maybe 30, 28, just so we get like a nice good view for this first shot, because I'm going to be using this to frame. Also, what I'm doing here is I'm holding down right click and scrolling up and down, which changes the speed in which the camera will move around the scene, which helps a ton, especially when placing the camera. Okay, that works for me. Now if you go up to the top left and click the little eject button by the Pilot Actor, it'll take you out, and then you can actually pin the image at the bottom right, so it stays, and now you have your camera scene. So now as I build out the scene, I can see what my camera sees as I build it out. So now again, we'll speed through this, but really I'm just placing trees and slowly art directing how I want it to look, iterating off of things. So I'll bring in the big mountains. Again, this is from the Coastal Pack, and kind of play around with different looks. So we have mountains and trees in the background, so it kind of blends in with the overall look of the scene that we're creating. I also realize I kind of want the scene to be a little bigger, so I'm going to drag out some of the rocks here so we have like a longer entrance to our scene. And then lastly, I'm going to use the big bushy trees to kind of bring in and spread all around so it blocks out our scene and it looks like there's depth to our scene and not just an empty level behind it. Now if you go to the top right and click directional light under your lighting, it comes in with your basic level. Click on that and kind of move out till you see the widget and change it over to rotation, and now you can move your sun around. So I am kind of going for an idea of maybe like the sunlight coming from right to left. So I'm going to start just playing around with that. And then if you go down to the right hand side, you can start playing around with different effects. So I'm going to go over to volumetric cloud, height fog, there we go. And I'm going to increase or scroll down to volumetric fog, click that on, which is going to add some more fog to the scene, and then bring the scattering distribution, kind of just play around with things. You can go up to the fog density, move that up, height fall off. I'm probably going to go for 0.2, 0.27. Overall, you want some fog in your scene, but not so much that it's overpowering. And then now I'm going to bring in some trees to kind of block out holes that I see throughout the map. Also, I'm noticing that the tree line is a little high. So I'm going to go around and shift click all the trees. Oh, no, not the landscape. I want to click on the trees. There we go. Right? Shift click, shift click, shift click on all the trees, and then just bring them down, because the idea is the trees are supposed to be blocking the scene. They're not necessarily going to be in it. So you want to bring the trees down, because since they're so high, you can kind of see through to the fact that there's a blank level in the background, which is not what you want. So I'm just going to bring all these trees down so there's no worry about your eyes being able to peek through. That way they fill the background and kind of hide the blank level behind it. Perfect. Okay, now we'll go back to playing around with our scene. I'm going to go to the directional light, kind of turn it around a little more. It's fun to try and find like the space between the trees and how the light shoots through. I'm going to go back to the volumetric height fog and play with that as well. Maybe bring it down to 0.17, 0.15. And then let's go back to the camera. And under camera, we can scroll down to post-process. Then I'm going to go over to lens, bloom, turn bloom on, and then you can play around with the intensity. It's really just going to like brighten up the scene, I guess. It kind of like fades out the highlights, almost like a glow effect in DaVinci. And then I can also go down to lens flare, turn that on as well, and you can get a nice little lens flare in there too. I want this first scene to look kind of like almost idyllic in a sense. So kind of just playing around with these settings to enable some stuff. Definitely suggest you go around and just play around with these and kind of see what they do. This is film grain, which can add some film grain to your scene. Sometimes it's a little intense, other times it's not. Really just play around with it, see what you like. Perfect. I'm going to go back to the directional light, directional light, and then I'm even going to play with the intensity, because I kind of want it to be a little darker. It's a little bright right now for my taste. So maybe I'll bring it down to a 3. And then with that set, you can actually go over here to the left again, to the little box of the plus, and go down to volumes, and then go down to post-process volume. Now the first thing you want to do is go to unbound, or type unbound into your search bar. You'll see infinite extent unbound. Click on that, which basically means all the changes you make will apply to the entire level. Now that that's done, type in EXP for exposure, go to min and max, click them both on, and then you want this to be the same number. You can play around with this number if you want, but I'm going to be using -5. Okay, so the next thing we're going to use is foliage, which is going to help us build out our scene and add some more detail. So if you go up to the left-hand corner, top left, where it says selection mode, click on that and go down to foliage. Make sure it's over paint. Once it's over paint, you can do control space to open your content browser, go over to your ms_forest tutorial, and just start adding some rocks and some twigs that we can add to our scene. Okay, so now what you can do is go over to brush size and make it much smaller. I think I'm going to go with 50. Maybe 99, and then you'll see little check marks over everything when you click on them. So click on the twigs, shift click on all the twigs, and then unclick the check mark, which now means they won't paint. So right now we're only painting the rocks. And the point of this is we know we have rocks on the sides of our scene. I'm going to make our paintbrush smaller, maybe 20. So we know we have rocks on the side of our scene. So the idea behind this is to try and blend in the static meshes by using these rocks scattered throughout. So there's more of a gradual fall off for these rocks. So I'm going to start adding them around the scene, especially where I have these little rock static meshes. So it kind of just blends in with the overall scene and doesn't look like I'm just using a static mesh. Once that's done, uncheck the rocks and do the same thing with the branches and kind of just spread them around your scene. Now that I have those painted in, I'm going to open up the content drawer, go over to some fallen leaves and add those to our foliage as well. Uncheck everything except for the fallen leaves and then slowly add in some fallen leaves as well. You'll see they're very subtle, so you can kind of keep clicking to get them to stand out more. Also, I really like the way these look too, and they kind of get covered up by the fact that the ground is all fallen leaves as well. So I'm actually going to be changing the ground here in a second as well. Okay, so you want to open up your content drawer, go over to the forest floor and add that one in. And then I'm going to go up to tiling and change it down to 0.2 and 0.2 and close that. And then zooming in here just to check it, I really prefer the way this looks overall. Okay, now with that done, we're going to want to go back to Quixel Bridge and add in the leafy weeds, wild grass, and dune sword sage. These are 3 different grass types that I'm going to add into my scene so I can start building out some grass. So now that those are downloaded, I'm going to go back to foliage and bring those assets in. Again, just shift click and kind of just drag and drop. Cool. Now that those are added in, I'm going to slowly filter out certain ones. So we're only painting pieces of the foliage, not all of the foliage. So I'm going to start off with grass here and just paint it in. So speeding up here just so you're not staring at this for hours, just painting in grass around the corners. Not too much in the rocks, but not outside the rocks. You're kind of trying to like focus on the actual ground access where a grass would go through. Also, if you look in the top left-hand corner, you'll see an erase button. I also click on that later on to delete some of the foliage too, because it's an iterative process and sometimes you'll paint in areas you don't want it to be in. So it works the same way as a paintbrush, and I just delete that way. Now that this is in, I realize nanite's not on, so I go control space, highlight everything, right click, and then go over to nanite and click on nanite. This is pretty important to activate just because it saves a ton of time for your computer. It's much easier for your computer to handle as well, so make sure you're turning on nanite as you're building things. It'll help you a ton. Also, I realized I was erasing still, so I'll switch back to paint, and now I'm painting on the fallen leaves. So I'm going to go back to the forest hut, and I'm actually going to bring in the other versions of the fallen leaves as well to kind of help bring more diversity of the fallen leaves. Make sure those are clicked and then start adding them in. Again, you'll see the entire time I'm doing this, the camera scene is always pinned to the bottom right. It just really helps you build out the scene so you know what's going to be, within view and how it overall looks. It's really nice having two different views, especially one that's more eye level, whereas when you're kind of drifting around, you don't really have a good grasp of the view. So definitely suggest keeping things pinned. Okay, now that I'm done making some little adjustments, I noticed that there's still some holes in the background. So I'm just gonna go around, kind of bring some trees down and then add some more into the background to just fill out the scene so nothing kind of looks empty in the background. Again, I'm using the versions of the trees that are kind of the most, I guess, leafy. That way they have a good chance of blocking out a lot of the background so you can't really see past them. And again, as I bring them in, some of them I'm kind of bringing lower into the landscape. That way the actual branches and leaves are blocking view, whereas I don't want them to be so high up that you can just see under them. Again, back onto the sun to try and play around with how that looks. I kind of want it just to peek through, and I kind of like how that patch of sunlight is there in the middle of the field. So I think that looks good. Okay, time to add displacement. So I don't like that this texture is flat, so I'm going to do Control Space, right click in the content drawer and create material. And then let's open up that material. And then Control Space again to open the content drawer in there. And then let's go find our ground material or surface. So once you're in the folder where it's held, take all the texture samples and bring them in. And then kind of just spread them out. We'll do the normal to the normal, which will be the blue one. And then base color in. And then now it's ARD. So ARD is ambient occlusion, roughness, and displacement, and it'll be in the order of RGB. So red is ambient occlusion, green is roughness, and blue is displacement. Now I'm going to try and make some tiling, so I'll do right click, type in texture coordinate, and then M click to get a multiply node. And then S click and bring both of those into the multiply node. M click again and bring the multiply into multiply, and then the what went to the base color, the top texture, let's bring that to multiply and then bring that into base color. Now click on the parameter node and let's name it tiling. And then from there you can actually click on the actual material node, which will bring up the details panel. And then you can scroll all the way down or actually go in the search bar and type in displacement. And this is how you're going to adjust the displacement, how strong it is. I'm going to leave it at 4 and 0.5 for now, but it'll be much stronger later. And then we can go back to tiling and change it 1, maybe 0.2. No, let's do 1. It won't let you save because there's an error. So let's actually delete that multiply node. Bring the multiply that's still around into the texture sample and the texture sample into base color. And then apply and save. That should be correct. Then now you want to click on the material you just made and then click on the landscape and go to our little arrow. Now you're going to want to click on your landscape and then scroll down and go to rebuild data. This way it can rebuild the nanite and it's going to look psychotic. So this basically just means that the displacement is too strong. So if you actually click on the main material node and type in displacement, you'll see displacement where it says magnitude and center. I'm going to reduce this down to 0.2, apply, save, and check that out. Again, it's a little too aggressive, so I'm going to open it one more time, go to displacement. Let's make this small so I can see the changes. Go to displacement again, and let's make this, let's change the center to 0.1 and the magnitude to 0.01. Save, apply. Very minimal. So now it just basically looks like it's a flat surface again. So let's make it maybe 0.05. And that's looking a little more realistic. Maybe 0.04. I like that. Let's just see what 0.03 looks like. Okay, that looks good for me. So now there's like a just slight amount of texture into our scene, but there's one issue. Everything we just painted, at least leaf-wise, is now deep in under the ground because displacement is rising. So let's go back to foliage mode. Let's go click on our leaves. And then if you scroll down, you're going to see something that says Z offset. So under the placement panel, there it is. So under the placement panel, you want to change the minimum. And, oh, I don't mean to paint everything. So let me make sure that everything is checked off. Undo. And then just go to the leaves, turn those back on, and go to paint. And you'll notice that you barely see the leaves still, which means you want to increase the min. Now I've increased the offset too much and the leaves are being painted above the ground. So the idea is to find where exactly you need to key it in so the leaves are being painted perfectly on the ground. So let's reduce it to 1. 1's pretty close, but it's still a little underground. So let's do 1. Maybe 1.5. Yeah, I need to do the min, not the max. Okay, getting definitely painted mixed in with the ground, which I actually like, but let's try 2, just see what that looks like. And that's being painted right onto the ground. Perfect. So I'm going to go over to erase, or actually I'm going to delete all the leaves. Yes, that way all the leaves under the ground aren't slowing down our processes. And then I'll re-add the leaves in. Yeah, filter for static meshes, go to the main one, click on the leaves, bring them in. And then now, make sure nanite is turned on for them. And then now I know that an offset of 2 on the min is where I want them to be to paint perfectly onto our displaced material. So now add those back in really quick. In a perfect world, I probably should have done this first, but alas, I did not. So add those leaves back in really quickly. Also, if you notice you're painting on rocks and stuff, you can change the ground slope angle to 0 to 10, which means it won't paint on anything that's angled more than 10 degrees, which is very helpful when painting. Perfect. Perfect. So time to add new assets. So I'm going to be adding a double-headed axe, old jar, old metal pot, wooden bucket, burnt tree branch, burnt tree log, burnt log, and campfire. And then a wooden bench and animal skull. All this can be found in Quixel Bridge. So just go in, type those stuff in, download it, bring it into your scene, and you are ready to go. Okay, so now that you have those stuff in your scene, I'm going to build like a little, I guess, camp here in the corner. So the first thing I'm bringing is the axe. It's going to be good to play around with it, get some fine motor skills when it comes to movements, kind of using the rotate and the move to get it just right. Also, if you look at the top right of your screen, you'll see the rotation, a grid, and a little size. If you click them on so they're blue like the rotate is right now, it'll go by the grid of 10. And if you click them off, it'll be free to go any small measurements you need. So sometimes it's good it's on the grid, sometimes it's not. You can kind of turn them on and off depending. So move that in just right. I just want it to like perfectly leaning. Awesome. I think that looks really good. Okay, so now let's bring in the bench. Where is it? There it is. It's a little big. Let's bring it down a tad maybe. There we go. Doesn't have to be anatomically correct. Again, bringing back the camera. When you click on it, it'll show the scene. And then you can clip your scene again with using a little pin on the bottom left of the little screen. And now I'll just be bringing in different objects into our scene. Let's drop this one to the ground, bring it closer, kind of just slowly design the scene. Make it a smaller one so they don't look identical. And then I like how it's clipping, so there's like some leaves and dirt inside of it. Looks really good. Let's bring in our jar. Bring in another jar. Remember to rotate them so they don't look perfect, identical. It's an easy thing to lose sight of. So I'll grab this top one, rotate it a little bit so they're not like perfect. There we go. Let's bring in a metal pot. And then let's find our campfire. Let's bring that in as well. And then it doesn't really fit the ground asset, so I'm going to have to sink this one a little bit into the ground. There we go. And then let's bring some extra branches to kind of fill it out. Okay, now that I'm done building things out, I'm going to go back to foliage mode and I'm going to try and erase some foliage so it fits a little better with the scene. It doesn't make sense having leaves clip into a fire. So I'm going to try and get rid of those. And again, just kind of art direct, delete, add, see how things look. Cool, I like that. Okay, and with that done, I'm just gonna make some final touches back in the foliage menu. Kind of just fill out the scene, paint some more foliage so it kind of builds out and just looks a little more natural. And then last but not least is one more Quixel run for some nice tree logs. So pause this, search what I found, download it, and add it into your scene. And I'm going to use this just to finally build out the last bits of the scene to build a little more life and add a little more texture to it. It's natural to see a lot of different branches out in forests, so want to add those throughout the scene. Just to make it a little more realistic and a little more, I guess, lived in. Okay, now as we finish these final touches, I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching. If you're curious how to actually plan out the scene and export it, I do have a few other tutorials on that one. This one's mainly on just how I built the actual level. So again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.